Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most chilling and heartbreaking cases of modern time, the Watts family murders. August 13, 2018. A quiet, hot summer morning in Frederick, Colorado. The sky was clear. The suburban homes stood neatly in rows, trimmed lawns and smiling neighbors creating a picture-perfect community. But behind one of those doors, something horrific had happened. Something unthinkable. A mother and her two young daughters, missing. No signs of forced entry. No blood. No screams. Just a chilling silence, and a father whose story kept changing. His name was Chris Watts. To many, he was the all-American dad. A hard-working oil field worker. A man who kissed his daughters on the forehead every night, who played with them in the backyard, and held his wife's hand during family photos. But just hours before his wife Shanann and daughters Bella and Celeste vanished, he had been at a birthday party. Laughing. Eating pizza. Watching his daughters play. He told investigators later. "We had an epic time. And yet, that very night, he took the lives of those two little girls. With their favorite blanket." This is the story of how love turned to lies. Of a smiling father who became a killer. Of a family that never saw the storm coming. Shanann Watts was a devoted mother. She had a bright smile, an infectious laugh, and an unstoppable work ethic. Originally from North Carolina, she met Chris Watts in 2010. At the time, Shanann had just come out of a difficult period in her life. She was battling lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, and her confidence had taken a hit. When Chris came into her life, she later said, "He was the best thing that ever happened to me." The two married in 2012, and their love seemed genuine. Shanann's social media was filled with videos and photos of the family, backyard barbecues, birthday parties, family vacations. She worked in health supplements through a multi-level marketing company called Thrive, and often shared motivational content online. Their two daughters, Bella and Celeste, affectionately called Cece, were bundles of energy. Bella was the older one, quiet and thoughtful. Cece was more energetic, always running around. In videos, they'd sing songs, shout, "I love you, mommy and daddy," and dance together in their living room. To the outside world, they were living a dream. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart. By mid-2018, Shanann noticed Chris becoming distant. He wasn't affectionate anymore. He wasn't texting back. He barely touched her. She confided in friends that something was wrong. In June, Shanann traveled with the girls to North Carolina for a summer vacation. Chris stayed behind for work, or so he said. In reality, he had started an affair. Her name was Nicole Kessinger, a co-worker. They met at Anadarko Petroleum, where Chris worked. Kessinger later told investigators that Chris claimed he was in the middle of a divorce. That he and Shanann were separating. She believed him. What she didn't know was that Shanann had no idea. On Sunday, August 12, 2018, Chris picked up Bella and Celeste to take them to a birthday party for a friend's child. It was a normal, sunny day. Photos from the party show Bella eating a cupcake, her face lit up with joy. Celeste ran around in a princess dress. There was laughter. There were balloons. No one noticed anything off about Chris. He wasn't angry. He didn't seem anxious. He smiled. After the party, Chris took the girls back to their home. Shanann was still in Arizona for a business trip. The girls took a shower. They ate pizza. He read them a bedtime story, then tucked them in. What happened next, he would later confess in disturbing detail. In the early hours of August 13, around 1:48 a.m., Shanann's friend Nicole dropped her off at home after returning from the airport. It was the last time anyone saw her alive. Hours later, Chris murdered his wife, reportedly during an argument. He then placed her body in the back of his truck. But what he did next is what truly horrified the world. He also killed his 2 daughters. Chris Watts' actions go beyond the word evil. He had 100 chances to walk away, to file for divorce, to ask for help, but he chose to destroy the very people who loved him the most. It started like any other Monday. Nicole Atkinson, Shanann's close friend, grew concerned when she hadn't heard from her. They were supposed to have a doctor's appointment that morning. Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant. But she never showed up. Nicole called. Texted. No response. By noon, she drove to the Watts house. Shanann's car was still in the garage, her shoes, purse, and phone were inside. But no one answered the door. Nicole called the police. Bodycam footage from the responding officer shows a calm, detached Chris Watts arriving on scene. He unlocked the door, let the officer in, and casually walked through the house. He pointed out that Shanann's wedding ring was on the nightstand. He mentioned that maybe she went on a walk with the girls. It didn't make sense. Nothing was out of place, except the people. Chris gave an on-camera interview the next day. He pleaded for their return. His voice was flat. His arms crossed. His eyes barely moved. If you're out there, just come back. If someone has her, just please bring her back. But his words didn't feel right. To investigators, and to the public, something was off. There were no signs of a struggle. The girls' beds were neatly made. The dog was inside, unharmed. Chris wasn't acting like a frantic husband or father. He was too calm. Too composed. And most chilling of all, he never once called Shanann's phone. The Bureau of Investigation quickly joined the search. Chris Watts was brought in for questioning on August 15, 2018. Though cooperative on the surface, detectives quickly sensed that something was deeply wrong. Chris showed no visible emotion. No panic. His effect was flat. When asked to take a polygraph test, he hesitated. Then agreed. The result? He failed. An investigation agent and polygraph examiner told him directly, "It's clear you're not telling the truth, Chris. This is your last chance to be honest." Under pressure, and after being left alone in the interview room with his father, Ronnie Watts, Chris finally cracked. But his first confession wasn't the whole truth. He claimed that after he told Shanann he wanted a separation, she flew into a rage and killed the 2 girls. In response, he said, he strangled her in anger. A desperate lie. A coward's attempt to shift blame onto his murdered wife. Investigators kept pressing. Days later, Chris gave a full confession, one that stunned even seasoned law enforcement. He admitted that after an argument with Shanann about his affair with coworker Nicole Kessinger, she told him their marriage was over and that he would never see the kids again. That's when he strangled her in their bedroom, as Bella walked in moments later, asking, "What's wrong with mommy?" Chris said he drove with Shanann's body and his 2 daughters, still alive, in the back of his work truck for nearly 45 minutes to a remote Anadarko oil site. Once there, he smothered Celeste first, then Bella, who fought back. But in a later 2019 prison interview, Chris changed his story. Forensic evidence, including autopsy results and Bella's injuries, which showed signs of a struggle, led many to believe that this first version may be closer to the truth. Regardless of the sequence, what is certain is that Bella, 4, and Celeste, 3, were murdered by their own father. Their bodies were then stuffed through an 8-inch hatch into separate oil tanks, and Shanann, who was 15 weeks pregnant with a baby boy named Nico, was buried in a shallow grave nearby. The location of the bodies horrified everyone. News spread like wildfire. The picture-perfect family, shattered by murder. Shanann's social media was flooded with people searching for clues. Videos of her praising Chris went viral, a haunting reminder of how much she trusted him. But there was another player in this story, Nicole Kessinger. When the story broke, Nicole was thrown into the spotlight. She cooperated fully with the police and made it clear, she had no idea Chris was still married, let alone living with his wife and children. She searched Shanann Watts on Google just days before the murders. Her browser history showed she was curious about Chris's wife. When the murders happened, she immediately reached out to authorities. Public opinion turned against her, but police found no evidence she was involved. Still, her involvement added another layer of tragedy. The affair wasn't just a secret. It was a motive. Chris Watts wanted a new life. He didn't want to fight for custody. He didn't want the image of a divorced dad. He wanted a clean slate, and in his twisted mind, the only way to get that was to erase the people who knew him best. Chris Watts was arrested on August 15, 2018. The evidence was overwhelming. Faced with the death penalty, he took a plea deal to avoid trial. He pleaded guilty to all 9 charges, including 3 counts of first-degree murder, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and tampering with bodies. During sentencing, Shanann's family gave emotional statements. Her father broke down in court. Her brother's voice shook with grief and rage. "I trusted you to take care of them. Not kill them." Chris sat silent. No apology. No emotion. The judge called the crimes, perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime I have handled. He was sentenced to 5 life sentences without parole. After his conviction, Chris Watts began serving multiple life sentences in a high-security prison. But even behind bars, his story continued to unfold. From prison, he began exchanging letters with journalists and authors interested in the case. Over time, Chris began sharing new details, some of which changed key elements of what had previously been reported. In one letter, he reflected on the moments leading up to the tragedy. He spoke about his daughter Bella, just 4 years old, and shared that she was aware something was wrong. Her confusion and fear in those final hours left a deep impression on investigators and readers alike. According to Chris, Bella had asked him a heartbreaking question, one that revealed just how much she understood in those final moments. But that wasn't the only version of events he offered. In his initial confession to investigators in 2018, Chris claimed that after an argument with Shanann, he drove with his daughters to a remote oil field where the unthinkable happened. That version suggested the girls were still alive during the long drive. However, in a follow-up interview in 2019 conducted in prison by law enforcement agents, Chris changed his account. This time, he said that the girls had not left the house alive, and that everything had happened in the early hours of the morning, before he ever left home. Investigators and experts have debated both versions. Some believe elements of the first confession may be closer to the truth, supported by forensic evidence. Others view the second account as an attempt by Chris to minimize the suffering he caused. What remains constant, though, is the devastating loss of Shanann, who was 15 weeks pregnant, and their daughters Bella and Celeste, whose lives were cut short in an unthinkable act of betrayal. The emotional weight of the case has never faded. It continues to impact law enforcement, the victims' families, and the public, who have followed the story for years, searching for meaning in something so senseless. The Watts case is more than a crime story. It's a tragedy about trust. About appearances. About how one man, one seemingly normal, smiling man, destroyed his entire world. Chris didn't just kill his wife and children. He took away futures. Birthdays. First days of school. Family vacations. Baby showers. He turned bedtime stories into nightmares. This story teaches us that domestic violence isn't always loud. It isn't always black eyes or police calls. Sometimes, it's silence. Isolation. A man slowly pulling away, while still smiling for the camera. We may never understand exactly what snapped inside Chris Watts. But we must remember Bella, Celeste, Shanann, and her unborn son, Nico. Because they mattered. And they were loved. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If this story moved you, if it made you feel angry, heartbroken, confused, or even just thoughtful, I want to hear from you. What warning signs do you think we often miss in toxic relationships? And how can we better support victims of emotional abuse before it turns deadly? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading them. If you found value in this story, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to see it, and subscribe for more true crime that puts victims first and facts before fiction. Thank you for watching, especially if you made it to the end. Stay aware. Stay safe. And never stop asking hard questions.